everyone, and welcome to another edition of Overcoming Depression and Anxiety, brought to you by Healthy Me Summits. I'm Joanna Rushton, your host, and we're being joined here today by Denni Francisco. Denni has worked in hundreds of executive roles across national and multinational organisations, as well as government sectors as well, in Australia, Asia and the Middle East. She understands the complexity of balancing key business performance outcomes with the real need to build and nurture human communities. For this purpose, she's committed to helping companies fuel sustainable high performance through meeting the energy needs of her people and the people of the organisations. Denni, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Joe. It's lovely to be here.
Denni, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think that, well, firstly, here in Australia, we're still in the month of October, and it is Mental Health Awareness Week here. And we know how very important mental health and the awareness of mental health in the workplace is. And we also know how important it is to both educate and inspire the employees, but also to give the relevant information to our employers and the sort of things that they can be doing within an organisation and the environment of an organisation to better manage workplace-related stress and mental health and wellness. So that's something that we're going to be talking about today with you, and I'm very excited to do so. The first thing I'd love you to share with our audience is a little bit about the energy project that you are CEO for here in Australia and New Zealand.
Yes, okay. Well, the energy project has really been in operation since 2003. We've really been on the ground in Australia for the last 2 years. The work has really been initiated by Tony Schwartz, who is an award-winning journalist, and has a real passion around how do we energize people, in other words, give people greater capacity to perform at their best across the four, I guess, energy sources is perhaps the best way to say it.
Okay, so maybe in that case we dive straight into understanding what those core energy sources are, because I know that when we talk about energy work in the workplace, and we'll define this a little bit later on, perhaps, and that's the difference between capacity and capabilities. But what are we talking about when we talk about the four key energy components of the employee?
Okay, well, as you've just referred to, the definition or the distinction, I guess, between capability and capacity, and I think that that's actually perhaps a good way to speak to it, because when we talk about capability, we generally talk about people's skills and talents, the opportunity that people have to show up in that way. And so what we would say that there is also to the capacity piece, because it really doesn't matter how skilled or talented people are, if they don't have enough capacity, in other words, they don't have enough personal energy or enough fuel in their tank to really deliver their best, then it's not possible for them to bring the full extent of their skills and talent to work or to life every day. So the four components of energy, and we would say that energy in physics is described as being the capacity to do work. So it kind of makes sense that the more capacity we have, the greater ability we have to show up to do more. Often in less time, which is also a bonus. So the four components or dimensions of energy that we speak to are physical energy, which is to do with the quantity of our energy. And physical energy has four components to it. It has some of them pretty obvious: nutrition, for one, exercise, and sleep. And most people will really understand those three. The fourth one, however, sometimes it's a little bit harder for people to grab onto, and that is renewal and what we call daytime renewal. So quite different to the type of renewal we get when we sleep. So the next dimension of energy is what we call emotional energy, and that's connected to the quality of our energy, because how we feel is profoundly affecting how we perform. And given that we are really the only species with the ability for rational, logical thinking, we're largely run by our emotions, and often quite unconsciously. So it turns out that we have some that there are very specific emotions that are connected to high performance. And often the default position within organizations can be that emotions are left at the door when we come to work. But we are emotional beings, and that is actually not possible. So not only do our emotions affect how we perform, but they also to affect our influence on other people. So emotions play a huge part when we're looking at how we manage our personal energy sources. The third one is mental energy, and that's really the energy of focus. We have vastly more ways today than ever before to be distracted, to pull out our attention, the juggle or the challenge we have with multitasking. We all know it's a myth, but we still all keep trying to do it anyway. So that's also to a huge strain on us. Open plan offices, technology, emails, mobile phones, etc. Huge pull on our mental energy sources. The fourth one is what we call the energy of the human spirit, or spiritual energy, really connected to meaning and purpose. Also to our personal values. And when we work on things, we could just imagine for a moment, when we work on things that really matter to us, do we bring more energy to it? Obviously we do. So when we are really connected to meaning and purpose, then we can put the other three energy sources to work to help us to achieve those things that make the biggest difference.
So, yes. Denni, one of the key messages I'm kind of hearing there is that for somebody to be going to work every day and not feeling like it is creating meaning and purpose in their life, they're just going to work and they're getting paid and they're ticking the box, of doing what they feel they need to do to, meet life's requirements, but they're not actually deriving true meaning and purpose in what they're doing. That seems to me like that could automatically be one thing that starts to lead towards depression, anxiety within the workplace. Would that be a fair comment to make?
Yes, I think that when we're working in a situation that really doesn't align with our own personal values, it's a really extremely difficult thing to deal with. And sometimes, we have people that maybe come into our programs who then say, well, what happens if we put employees through the program and they realize that their values are not aligned with the organizational values and they may leave? And I guess the response to that would be that if the values aren't aligned, then isn't it better to know that? And isn't it better to have somebody within the organisation whose values are aligned? So sometimes building that awareness may create that outcome, but I feel that that's a positive outcome anyway, because people can't possibly show up at their best when there is a disconnection or misalignment around values, because that's our internal driver.
A really important point and interesting one as well, and I think it probably has many layers to it as well. So when we see within a working environment these core, let's call them, the 4 core needs of an employee, when we find that a working environment does not meet the requirements needed to help the employee meet these 4 key needs, what sort of things do we see show up? Is it quite distinctive between each of those 4 energy systems in terms of what you start to see in the workplace?
Well, I think that many organisations have a default position around how they conduct business, and traditionally people's input or people's contribution within an organisation is often measured around time invested. It's also obviously it's outcome focused as well, but often when there's a high level of demand, competing deadlines, etc., people will generally throw more time at something. So they may get up earlier, they may go to bed later, or they may stay at their desk and have lunch, or just burn the midnight oil, as we would say, thinking that if I throw more time at this, I am actually going to get more work done. Well, the research actually shows that we cannot continue to be as productive at, say, 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the afternoon as we were at 8 o'clock in the morning if we're not actually taking renewal and managing our energy throughout the day. So what we do see, we speak to, when we speak to people, the Energy Project has actually done the energy audit around 150,000 people around the globe. And what that has actually shown is that people are really experiencing a personal energy crisis across those 4 energy quadrants. Because we try to do all of those things and manage and balance it all, but it's actually not humanly possible because we're not computers. We can't continually to run non-stop, running multiple programs sort of at the same time. So bit by bit, in answer to your question, what we start to see in the organisation is that we see a diminishing of the potential for productivity and also to engagement. And if we think about engagement for a moment, when the traditional definition of engagement is the willingness to expend discretionary effort at work. But what we would say at the Energy Project is not just about being willing, but it's actually also about being able, so willing and able to expend discretionary effort at work. So if we're thinking about the impact on organisations, then engagement and productivity has to be, a key component of that. Are we providing the workplace environment that can greatly support people to be able to deliver their best?
Is there a certain look to that environment? What is perhaps a new working proposition or a new proposition to the workplace these days that does look to facilitate? And can you give possibly some examples of organisations that you've worked with that have adopted your program through the Energy Project and has been successful in changing that environment?
Okay. Well, firstly, to answer the first part of the question, if we're to look at organisations, the challenge for organisations is to shift from the traditional focus of getting more out of people to instead perhaps investing more in people's core needs, the 4 core needs that we mentioned before, so the people are freed and fueled and able to bring more of themselves to work, so therefore their work becomes more sustainable. When we think about leaders, leadership, the key is for leaders to think of themselves as chief energy officers, because energy is contagious, and for better or for worse, and disproportionately so for leaders because of the incredible influence they have on the people that they lead. In the Towers Watson research study that was actually done, they were saying that the manager is at the heart of what we might think of as the personal employee ecosystem, because managers shape individual experience each and every day. So leaders are incredibly influential and energy is contagious. But also for individuals, employees, the challenge is to take measurable responsibility for their experience and not allow themselves to default into that victim role, because we can't always have the external circumstances that we would like to have in order for us to be able to run our life in the way that we would like to be run. So no matter what's going on within an organisation, what we do is we really try to work with individuals so that they can build a level of awareness around how they are managing their energy sources within their organisations despite what's going on around them. And it's actually quite interesting when we think about taking that personal responsibility, because it's quite interesting to consider how 2 people can experience the same workplace, the same demands even, and they can experience it in a couple of different ways. So they're the sort of, if we're looking at individuals, leaders, and organisations, sort of some of the things that they could be considering. In answer to the second part of your question about some of the organisations that we've worked with, and how it's played out. For one example is one of our clients in their team meetings on a monthly basis. They allocate 10 minutes at the start of each team meeting to check in with each other on how they're managing their energy rituals individually, what the team could maybe be doing to support the individuals in implementing those. But also to team rituals. What is it that they're doing as a team that looks at managing the energy of the team in terms of, how they might run their email systems, when they implement meetings, how they encourage each other to take lunch breaks and get away from their desk and get outside. Also had set up walking meetings, standing meetings, that type of thing. So that's just one organisation. Other organisations have done things such as even set up a charter for how they're going to do emails, not expecting people or their employees to be emailing, throughout the night, not holding meetings first thing in the morning when people are at their most creative and most productive, perhaps. When we actually think about how many meetings are held first thing in the morning, when it doesn't allow people to look at what's my most important thing I need to do today, but rather be sitting in a meeting for anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to 3 hours sometimes. For that to then to be looked at to say, is this the most productive way to be doing this? So there's just a number of really quite simple things in the context of which are simple, but you always then have to go against the way that we've always done things. Really be prepared to say, to shine the light on some of those practices and ways of doing things and say, what, really, is this going to deliver us the outcome that we're really looking for? And that's often led by the leaders within an organisation.
So what I'm really hearing there is the comparison between the old paradigm and the new paradigm, whereby the old paradigm was really about expecting that if you paid somebody for their capabilities, that you would also be paying for their energy, their engagement, their passion, their enthusiasm, and their willingness to turn up. Whereas that's no longer the case. I'm really hearing that model of capabilities and skill is maybe not as important, or perhaps that somebody's capabilities capacity to turn up is maybe even more important and needs to be looked at as a priority in terms of how to access more effectively and efficiently. Would that be? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I'd probably say that just a little bit differently in terms of, people's skills and talent are always really important, and that's actually why they're employed within an organisation. Organisations employ the best that they possibly can employ. And so there are so many organisations that actually obviously have people with great skill and great talent, which is why they have the positions that they have. However, when those people can also to learn to manage the energy sources that they have within them, it gives them a powerful competitive advantage, because organisations are full of talented and great people. When you overlay that with being energised across all of those 4 energy sources, then it just makes sense that we show up so much more powerfully. So that competitive advantage, I think, is a really significant one for individuals to think about, leaders to think about, and for organisations. So if 2 organisations are, say, competing with each other in a marketplace, both staffed with very talented and skilled employees, one organisation is actually doing the old paradigm, which is let's just have our people work harder for longer and just keep pushing for outcome. And over here we have the organisation that truly understands if we want our people to be performing at our best, we must help them, support them and encourage them to manage the energy so that in everything that they do, they show up as powerfully as possible. If you think about it in terms of a fuel tank and how much fuel we would have in our personal fuel tank, we can't possibly perform at our best on a near-empty fuel tank. So, that's how we would say and support the importance of bringing real awareness to the management of energy.
So I guess what I'm really hearing there is that the new commodity is really starting to value energy over time, and that perhaps in the old paradigm, time was a great commodity. It was all about having the time to, get what needs to be done. Whereas in the new paradigm, the commodity is about energy, and it's more about how much energy you have to utilize in any given time. We know we've only got 24 hours in a day. That's never going to change. Whereas our energy is the fact that we're literally a biological battery that's able to renew itself, as you say, and refuel itself. Then learning how we do that moment to moment throughout the day to maintain those energies across physical, mental, emotional and spiritual, then that's what supports both our capacity and our capabilities.
Yes, absolutely. Time is equally important. It is important as well. Time is important, but it's the energy we bring to the time that we expend. So simply just being at our desk for 10 hours in a day is not enough. It's how much energy are we bringing. Yeah.
So one thing I'd love to delve into a little bit more, because I know that at the Energy Project you recommend something called 90-minute ultradian rhythms, is that right?
Ultradian rhythms, yes.
Ultradian rhythms, and that's a concept of based around research around how long we can stay engaged mentally, emotionally to any one given task. Is that the general idea, that 90 minutes and then you need to somehow get up, move around and refuel the mental, emotional, physical energy quadrants? Is that right?
Yes, the research that sits behind the ultradian rhythm has shown that as human beings, we operate best when we expend and renew energy. That's how we're designed. So as I alluded to before, we're not designed to be full on, full out continually without a significant drop in our energy levels and therefore perhaps our productivity. So the concept behind ultradian rhythms, if we can work with the way that our body is designed to work, to expend energy and then renew, then we encourage people to work within the ultradian rhythm, which is that 90-minute component. So what we're looking to do is to look at, okay, then how do we maintain as full attention and focus as possible to do what it is that we need to do, but being conscious that we have some sort of renewal each 90 minutes. Now, some people get really nervous about that because they think, oh gosh, well, what does that mean, and do I have time to do that? But it's actually not about how long we renew for, but how good we are at it. And sometimes that renewal might even just take a couple of minutes. That might be just a way of breathing. It might be getting up from our desk and going speaking to a colleague instead of sending them an email, or it might be going to the water fountain to get a glass of water. So it's just looking at how we break up our time. Because the other thing, of course, in the modern workplace is how long people sit at their desk. Now they're saying that sitting is going to be the same health hazard as smoking has been in the past. So again, that thing of sitting and thinking about, okay, well, how might I renew each 90 minutes, and what are some of the things that I can do? As I said, sometimes just very short. Other times it might be getting out at lunchtime and taking a 20-minute walk. Once we start to become aware of how our body is responding to renewal, but not just ourselves physiologically, but also to cognitively, we come back from a renewal break and we just feel more mentally clear. But of course, we don't know that until we start experiencing it for ourselves. But that's certainly one of the key things that we really try to work with our clients about is how do we manage the renewal component.
And I can imagine from what you've just said that that would be very, very different for each individual.
Yes, and it can be, yeah. And it's actually it brings up another point, which I think is I think you and I had this conversation when we were off camera, but we're talking about then how do organisations, say, who work on international time zones and all different sorts of hours. And some clients also too say, look, just sometimes there is just time when the demand is great and there's a very tight deadline, and so therefore the hours do extend out. Now, a couple of things about that is if the hours are always extended out, that's one issue. But there are times in any organisation when perhaps the demand is higher than at other times. So what happens then is that it's even more critical about, well, how will I manage my energy across that time? So if I'm under pressure in a really tight timeline and right now I have to put in 10 or 11 or 12 hours, so rather than coming in the morning, working all the way through to the end of that 10 or 12 hours, what is it that I need to be doing throughout the day to ensure that I keep my fuel tank topped up so that I am just as productive at the 9th hour or at the 10th hour than I was, say, at the 2nd or the 3rd hour. Because that's, again, the shift in the paradigm of actually thinking, if I put in 10 or 12 hours here, I'll just get more work done. It doesn't quite work that unless we're also to ensuring that we're energized throughout that time.
So what's really interesting there is that I'm starting to, hear the importance of, what we talk around self-management and self-mastery of one's own energy is learning to understand and listen to the biological feedbacks of the body around the food that you eat, how much water you need in a day, what you're breathing, how effectively or ineffectively are you breathing, because we know that a dysfunctional breathing pattern can elicit a stress response and therefore use a lot more energy up in the body. And so, we're looking also probably at, when you mentioned before, exercise. That's a really important area, and we know that in terms of mental health, that exercise is really important to induce the brain chemistry, the hormones that help to uplift the physiology and biology of the body. However, we also know that the wrong type of exercise or too much exercise is going to deplete the body further of the very energy that we're looking for. So it sounds like there's this, in the learning of self-management and the learning of self-management of your own energy, it's the relationship that you have with food. Some foods will deplete us of energy. Some foods will actually give us energy. Our levels of hydration, how much movement and the right type of movement, and looking at what we need when we need it throughout the day. And then, of course, the sleep component, which, it's so funny. We kind of relate to sleep as being common sense, we need it, but how often it's the very first thing that goes when we are on that deadline and when we do have those commitments to reach, which, I guess is even more important than during the day to take that renewal and understand what is it that renews your battery most effectively and most efficiently if you are only on 6 or 7 hours sleep for a period of time.
Yes, and I think a good way to speak to that is if we think about, I think we can all think of times when we think, I know that if I just got up and went out and did some exercise, I'd feel so much better, but oh man, you know what, I just don't have the energy to do that. I think we all have been in that place at one time or another. And the way that I think about that is if we wait until our fuel tank is pretty much empty, it's just a harder climb to get back. But if we can become aware of when the fuel tank is starting to go down, to think, you know, what I really need to do now is I really need to get up and get some exercise, or I really need to go and have a healthy snack, or what is it that I need to do to get my energy or my fuel tank topped up. So we're not waiting until we're completely depleted, completely empty, or even down sort of towards the empty tank. But just knowing when that fuel tank is starting to drop, what is it that I need to be doing? You know, am I getting enough sleep? But what sort of foods am I eating? And should I actually make some different choices? You know, what am I doing throughout the day around refueling? You know, or what emotionally, what is it that I'm just going over and over and over in my head about something that's happened that I can't change? How much fuel am I giving to that? So somebody cuts me off on the way to work this morning, and I spend my time just going, I can't believe that happened, and that was just so rude, or that was so dangerous, and I could be going over that for the whole day. And the way that I think about that is a bit like having a hole in our fuel tank, and our fuel is just leaking all over the road. We're giving up that fuel to somebody we don't even know, or to a situation that we can't change. So again, being aware across those four energy sources of how am I using the fuel? You know, in mental, when I'm trying to multitask and I'm trying to do 3 or 4 things at once, you know, just sort of be thinking, wow, you know what, I'm expending a lot of fuel this way. Is this actually going to give me the outcome that I really want? You know, so perhaps not. So it's that. I just think that the thought process around the energy gauge is a simple one for us to have a look at.
And tell me, I'm not sure whether or not you know the answer to this, or if there's even been any research done on this, but has there been any research on the correlation of when organizations invest back into certain things like rest tanks, or you know, recreational areas within an organization, or actual designated areas for kind of rest and replenish? Has there been any, you know, research to show that there is a return on that investment, that when an organization actually makes available specific areas within a workplace for you to either go and, you know, renew, actually come away from work and renew, or that sort of thing? Is there any research to back that up?
Well, one of the studies that was done by the Energy Project in 2014, and it was done in partnership with the Harvard Business Review, and it was a study called Our Quality of Life at Work. And in the earlier discussions we've just been having, we talked about the 4 core needs of individuals across physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And certainly what that study showed, 20,000 employees taken globally, was that depending on whether 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those needs are met, it has a significant impact on engagement, on productivity, on employee happiness, etc. So we would have to accept, I think, that when we start to take care of the people within our organisation, we get greater outcomes. If you look at some of the, you know, successful creative and so on organisations, you know, around the world who've been working with the Energy Project, it's organisations who recognise that we need to take care of our people if we want to be at our best going forward. And so, you know, there are organisations who implement what we could call well-being strategies that the Energy Project is working with. And they've been working with us for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. So we would have to know that is working, because no organisation continually invests that way if they're not getting a return. So without being able to state, you know, other specifics around that, it's certainly all of the research that we see and that we have undertaken totally supports it.
Okay. And so if organizations or leaders of organizations are tuning into this particular interview and are intrigued as to well, what area do they perhaps need to look at within their organization that could better support those 4 energy quadrants of their employees? What sort of programs do the Energy Project offer organizations? Are they done on a yearly basis, a monthly basis? How do organizations engage with the Energy Project to facilitate the various programs you have?
Okay. We have a flagship program that's called the People Fuel Program. And really what that program is, it's a 2-day program. It's either done 2 days consecutively or 1+1 day. But what that does, it introduces the science of energy management. Then it goes more deeply into each of those energy sources so that people can look by way of an energy audit, how they're managing their energy currently and what they could be doing to improve that going forward. And so we spend time going through each of those 4 quadrants, looking at the very specific things that people can do to manage their personal energy going forward. And then as a part of that collectively, what will often happen is then how do we take it then from the individual to the team and then to the organization. As a support to that program, we also then follow up with a program that we call Leader Fuel, which is where we work with leaders so that they can more greatly manage and support the energy of the people that they lead. Getting back to what we were saying earlier about the influence of leaders on the people. So, and then there's a whole sustainability piece. I think that what's really important about the work we do at the Energy Project, it's a partnership with each organisation we work with. So what is it that we need to be doing? How do we support the organisation in implementing these processes to ensure that there is a shift around not just the capability piece of their people, but the capacity piece of their people?
So I guess one of the most important questions to ask is the relevant research that has been done that correlates all of the work within these programs and how that has actually positively impacted the reduction of mental health or stress-related issues at work. Because ultimately, here we are talking about overcoming depression and anxiety, and we're tuning in relationship to workplace stress and how that can impact and create depression and anxiety. Is there significant research that people can leaders can go away, perhaps with Harvard Business Review, and look at the various research that's been done to make and see the correlation that when we implement some of these strategies and these well-being strategies, that we actually do start to see a reduction in absenteeism, a reduction in mental health and workplace stress?
Yes, we have the white paper that was done in the partnership between the Harvard Business Review and the Energy Project that I mentioned before, which is actually a very interesting reading in terms of the outcomes when we start to take care of the 4 core needs of individuals. There's also too a series of case studies of clients that we've worked with in terms of the impact on absenteeism, presenteeism, reduction in unscheduled sick leave, etc. So there is enough compelling evidence around when we work with people in this way, then the organisations get greater outcomes. The study that was done by PwC in conjunction with Beyond Blue showed that for every dollar that's invested in keeping people mentally well in the workplace, there's a $2.30 return. Wow. So why would we not be taking a proactive way or approach to take care of our people? Because as you said at the very start, with the work that we've done, and one of the titles of Tony's book is the way we're currently working just isn't working. And we can continue to go down this path for long periods of time and suffer the consequences of that. But what we're finding is really progressive organisations are realising that, just expecting employees to show up to do more with less continually, with all of the challenges that actually happen in the modern day, highly competitive workplace, we need to be looking at strategies of how do we take care of our best asset, which, as we all know, are our people. Sometimes that gets a bit of lip service, but we all know that that is our biggest resource. We need to be taking care of the people in order for them to deliver their best. So we'd say it's time to usher in a new era, and this one is the human era in the workplace.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to make the difference.
Yeah. And I think, one of the key messages that we've shared throughout the entire conversation here is that it is very much, it's a joint effort. It has to be both that of the employee and the employer coming together and being equally responsible and accountable. And then you get the best results for both parties.
Oh, absolutely. So a workplace that really works, it begins with employers and employees truly valuing and investing in one another.
Yeah.
It's a holistic concept. Yeah.
Denni, thank you so much for sharing the information that you have. I think it's a really important area and topic of conversation, and that is, the workplace environment and how we can start to view it in a way in which will actually support health, wellness of the employee more effectively. I'd like to finish, as I have with all of our speakers, and that's simply just to ask if you would kindly contribute an I am statement. We know the power of the I am, we know the power of affirmations, and we know how they can deplete our energy or actually fuel our energy. So if you're able to share with us an I am statement that you use or you have used in the past, that would be amazing.
Okay, all right. So I am conscious of the level of my fuel tank across all 4 energy sources and top it up continually throughout the day.
That's very affirmative.
I hope that's useful. That just came off the top of my head, and I hope it even makes sense, right? If I could also just share with you, perhaps as another way of finishing too, is one of my favourite quotes, which is, our greatest creation is the life that we lead. And we can't possibly lead the biggest and best life on a near empty or totally empty fuel tank.
Very true, very true. Well, thank you for finishing on those words of wisdom. I know that people will take on board everything and start to implement what they're ready to. It's all about starting wherever the individual is at and meeting them where they're at and what are the next steps they're willing to make and choices they're willing to choose that starts to take them in the positive direction of refueling their energy positively. So again, thank you so much for joining us, Denni. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
Thanks, Joe. It's been great to be with you.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.